when people are trying to figure out what type of drinker they are they like, "I'm mild, moderate, severe drinker?" Because some people don't know, like, they're like, "Oh, I drink, like, 2 to 3 drinks a night, and then that's not that much." And I'm like, "Well, when you add them all up, it is."
I know, that's kind of the reality of, like, we lie to ourselves, you know?
Yeah, but then people don't know, like, what happens after that or, like, how it starts tanking the gut and the thyroid.
Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. Today I have an incredible guest on. In fact, I'm a little nervous for this interview and you might start laughing, but I did get nervous. I was like, I want to make sure I ask the right questions because my guest today is so knowledgeable. So, welcome, Dr. Valerie Gettings. You are a naturopathic medical doctor and a certified sports nutritionist. You also have like a whole bunch of like acronyms behind your name, like
Yeah.
NMD, which I was like, I don't know what these mean.
Naturopathic medical doctor.
Oh, I love that. Okay. And then CISSN.
So that is the International Society for, Sports Nutrition. So that's
Oh,
my
cool.
sports nutritionist certification.
I love it. So, but you take hyperthyroid women from bloated and tired to having mental clarity and energy so they can crush their to-do list.
Mhm.
This is what I'm so excited about though, is you're passionate about digestive health concerns, stress reduction, thyroid rebalancing and support, pain reduction. You do sports medicine movement, effective solutions for superhuman syndrome. But really why I wanted to invite you on as well is because you have been in recovery from alcohol and other substances for 23 years. So you really understand, the process of, being an alcoholic and then also recovering from it and treating
Yes.
your body correctly. So
Yes.
we're going to dive into some cool stuffs today. But really, what kind of inspired you to go down that path of becoming a naturopathic medical doctor?
So for me well, first of all, I'm so thankful to be here, so thank you so much, Samantha. I was having 60 to 80 seizures a day and working for the military at a very high stress job, and was trying to figure out the solution to the seizures, and finally went to a traditional naturopath who changed my diet, changed everything, changed different supplements each month and all of this stuff, changed completely everything, and then in 8 months, I stopped having seizures. And so I was
Well,
like, "Oh my gosh, there's something to this diet and gut-brain interaction," and I was experiencing it in real time, and so after that, I left working for the military, and I was like, "I'm gonna go become a naturopathic doctor and help people with their health issues."
that was really cool. I go to a nurse practitioner
Yeah.
and she's just like totally changed my life. I like talk about her all the time. She's been on the podcast and I'm like, I have absolutely loved it because a lot of times you go to the doctor and you're like, I don't feel good. And they're like, well, I don't know. And so I feel like when you go down this route, you can really get to, you hear this a lot, the root cause of what's going on, but it's true,
Yeah.
you know? So you were in the military?
I worked for the military for 7 years. I was a public affairs specialist for Navy medicine.
Oh,
So I did
that's
all
really
their
awesome.
yeah, I did all their social media, and I was the ghostwriter for the Navy Surgeon General and director of community outreach and many other jobs.
So that's kind of like a big deal.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah. So where in this does your recovery start or where along your timeline? Like before becoming a doctor, after becoming a doctor?
Way before. So when I was 22 years old, I ended up having liver failure at 22 from drinking and using other substances, and that's kind of what prompted me to start seeking some help. So it was
Yeah.
definitely way before, so
So to have liver failure at 22, that's like a pretty big deal, right?
yes. Yeah.
I know on TikTok I get a lot of questions about sobriety and things like that. And they're like, well, how much were you drinking? Do you have liver issues? Do you have all these things? And I'm like, well, actually, no, I just was gaining weight rapidly and my alcohol like had gotten out of control?
Yes.
So it's always kinda interesting, like, where people end up, where they start, and, like, the whole process in between. So while I was, like, diving into, like, your background on your website, by the way, I found that you have a link, and I think this is really great. We're gonna put this in this show notes, but you had a link in your link tree. It was check your alcohol use here, so I clicked it this morning. And for you guys listening, it's cdc.gov/alcohol/check your drinking, and it has, like, a quiz, and I was like, "I'm just gonna take this quiz."
Yeah, just to see.
Yeah, I was trying to take it from the perspective of, like, last year me who wasn't full of shit, for lack of a better word. Because with
Mhm.
drinking, I just don't think you're honest about anything.
Right. Right, exactly.
So I took it and I went through it, and obviously it was like, "You should consider drinking less." That's what it told me at the end of it. And I'm like, "Ha, little do you know, I've been sober for 8 months." But it really kind of puts you at a serious risk, and there's a lot of health consequences, including cancer, liver disease, and you and I, before we started, like, recording, we were talking about that. So, what is the link between alcohol and cancer?
Yeah, so alcohol and a lot of people don't know this. When they did research, they found like a third of people just were not aware of the link between alcohol use and the increase of cancer. So, what alcohol actually does is that alcohol is actually converted to something called acetaldehyde that directly attacks the DNA. So, it makes it difficult for your cells to function properly, for the mitochondria to function properly, and it affects important micronutrients like folate. So, alcohol actually leads to 7 different types of cancers. So, cancer of the mouth, the throat, esophageal cancer, larynx or voice box cancer, liver, colorectal, and breast cancer. So, a lot of different things. So, it's yeah, a lot of people ask kind of, well, how much alcohol can I drink then? So, really, the way to look at it is like the more that people drink, the higher the risk.
So, what do you kind of consider, like, a normal drinker? Like, what is a good level of alcohol? Like, do you feel like there is one?
I mean, obviously, the more you drink, the more risk there is, but for people who are drinking occasionally meaning not every day, but I do kind of like the Health Canada guidelines for alcohol use. So theirs is like no more than 2 drinks per week.
Per week?
Yeah, and they just changed their guidelines about 2 years ago. So, yeah, 0 to 2 drinks per week as of Health Canada.
So there's heavy drinking, moderate drinking, and kind of everything in between, but, like, what would you say is moderate drinking, and what is heavy drinking?
Yeah, so moderate alcohol use is defined as up to 1 drink per day for women and up to 2 drinks a day for men. And then heavy alcohol use is going to be 0 to 14 drinks per week for men and then 0 to 7 drinks per week for women. So the guidelines in the US. So that's a lot of drinks. That is quite interesting. I would probably say less than 14 drinks a week for men and then 7 drinks for women.
And it again, my brain is like, 7? What is that, like, 1 a day? Like,
But then the federal government's dietary guidelines for Americans, moderately, it says that it's up to 2 drinks a day for men, which would be 17, and then 1 drink a day for women, which would be 7. But that's also in those same guidelines what it is for heavy alcohol use. So, I feel like all of that is way too much alcohol per per week.
I know,
So
and, looking back, it's just a great reminder where I was like, heavy drinking, and then, like, times it by 100, I was there.
but a lot of people don't realize that, and I think that's where people kind of think to themselves, like, "What type of drinker am I?" And I think the biggest thing is for people. There are some people who are heavy drinkers, and they can have those 7, drinks a week, if they're a woman, and be fine, and then just stop drinking and not drink for, like, a bit. But then there are people who can't. So I think the biggest thing is, like, if you're trying to control your drinking, you may have a substance use issue. But again, there's people who can, just drink 7 drinks and, like, stop and be fine for months and then don't think about it at all. But if you're, like, consistently, like, obsessing about it and trying to control it, then that's where there may be an issue.
Okay, that's kinda crazy because, I'm, like, in the new I feel like I'm very newly sober, especially
Yeah.
compared. And I look back and I remember thinking, like, if I went somewhere for the night and I was capable of limiting myself to 2 drinks, I would come home and be like, "I am amazing. Like, did you guys see that? I only had 2 drinks." But, like, it would have been 2 drinks in that specific setting, you know?
Right.
But 2 drinks a week, like, you saying that to me, even, like, the alcoholic part of my brain is, like, panic mode. I was like, "There how could someone just have 2 drinks a week?"
'Cause they're probably not an alcoholic.
That's what I'm saying. I'm like, "This is why I go to meetings, guys."
Yes.
I had I was speaking with someone not too long ago, and we were talking about, like, alcohol and hormone levels and,
Yes.
perimenopause and all those things, and she just told me, like, straight up, she was like, "Honestly, Samantha, if you are having perimenopause symptoms, no alcohol, like, should be involved at all." But, like, nobody wants to hear that, and that was actually right before my decision to get sober. But, like, what is the connection or have you seen the connection between, like, women, let's say, like, 35 and above, and their alcohol consumption and perimenopause and their hormones and all of those things?
Oh, yeah. So kind of like the symptoms that you were experiencing when you came in, right? Kind of like the weight gain and, not the inability to lose weight, all that sort of stuff. That happens as a result of drinking, but also with alcohol's interaction with the thyroid. So what starts to happen is alcohol starts to slow down your thyroid. That leads to weight gain, decreased metabolism. So, people who are like, "Oh my gosh, I'm doing everything. I'm working out, I'm eating healthy, I'm doing all the things. What is going on?" So the alcohol component is definitely in there. And then joint and muscle pain, depression, dry and thinning hair. So I often hear a lot of people that say, my hair was once really beautiful and thick, and now it is thin, and I'm losing a lot of hair. What is going on? So, the other connection with alcohol and the thyroid is alcohol actually reduces thyroid volume. So, it makes the thyroid smaller. And then heavy alcohol use reduces thyroid hormones. The T3 is the active thyroid hormone, and then T4 is inactive. But alcohol use actually brings down both thyroid hormones.
So, what does our thyroid do? Because I had a friend recently who the doctor was like, "We just wanna take your thyroid out," and she's really been, like, fighting to keep her thyroid.
Yeah. So, I mean, your thyroid is responsible for all of those kind of symptoms I listed. So, your weight. So, it's kind of like the furnace in the body where either, people get hot, heat resistant or they'll get cold, but it's responsible for metabolism, muscle production, mood. So, anxiety or depression, depending on if it's high or low, and then your hair as well. So, literally everything. So many, so many things.
So, it's crazy because 'cause I'm like, "Okay, so if you stop drinking and your thyroid what else, like, does it take, though, for your thyroid to function properly?"
Nutrients. So, gut function. So, this is where the gut and thyroid play a role. So, when people are drinking more than 3 days in a row, it starts to tank their microbiome. So, the microbiome then doesn't have a chance to recover. We get 20% of our thyroid hormone from our gut. So, if our gut is inflamed and not functioning and you're not giving it a chance to survive, then the thyroid will be impacted and everything starts to slow down.
Okay. So, okay, take me into the gut biome. Like, what
Yeah.
exactly is that? Can we, like, just totally dissect gut health right now? And, I'm just hearing it from, like, influencers and the things you see on, TikTok, but I'm like, what actually is it?
Yeah. So, in the gut itself, so in the small intestine, large intestine, we have millions of gut microbes. And some of these microbes, I like to think of it as like little armies, like some are good armies and some are bad. So, what they're doing is keeping balance within the gut, but then they also make micronutrients. They also help us to break down our food and then make vitamins and nutrients from that for the body to use. It's also our immune system is in the gut. So when the gut is functioning properly, then our immune systems can actually function properly. So you're not getting sick as much. You're able to, a lot of people say, oh, that person has like an iron gut, or they're able to tolerate certain foods and things like that. So
So
hopefully that helps.
no, it does actually, but I'm like, I need, like, a magic school bus episode.
Yes. Yeah, yeah.
I'm like, "Can we go in and explore, like, what exactly is happening?"
Yeah. But like simply
Mhm. Like, I could definitely get on board with, like, an adult magic school bus version.
to make it easy, like Cliff
Oh,
Notes version.
yeah, like a Cliff Notes, but, like, make it fun.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes, definitely.
Okay, so after you, like, well, you've been in recovery for a long time, like, did you take certain steps to heal your body, or is this stuff, like, you've learned later on? Like, what would you recommend to people?
Yeah, well, first I wanted to go back just a quick for the hormone aspect. So I also wanted to state that drinking alcohol also starts to increase estrogen. So that is estrogen is pro-grow. So some cancers are sensitive to estrogen, so we don't want that. And I don't know if you've seen any kind of the hoppy kind of like craft beers or whatever. A lot of them have phytoestrogens in them, which is also not all that great. And then from this, it causes a lot of menstrual cycle irregularity, and then decreased fertility. So those are the other 2 components, not only the thyroid, but also like estrogen, testosterone, and then changes in menses and fertility.
What do you think about, like, the damage that, like, you've kind of done yourself in your early 20s? Not, like, you specifically, but just people in general, and I almost feel like we're paying for it, now I'll be 40 next month,
Mhm.
and I'm like, Did we do a lot of damage then? Is it repairable?" Like, how do you start back on that repair track?
Yeah, I was asked that question also recently about when we are developing, when our brains are still developing and we're causing so much damage, is that repairable? And I think to some extent, yes, but I think to some extent, no. Like, there's some people who started drinking and stunting their growth essentially in their teens. And then you see them later on as adults and they're still struggling with social issues or social communication issues, kind of like a teen does, versus someone who's maybe in their mid-20s. I don't know if you've seen that at all as well.
Well, in recovery, I hear there's a lot of sayings. I'm sure you know tons, but they're super helpful. But I do hear people say, like, the age you started drinking and then the age you stop is kind of like where your brain is at.
Yeah,
So, like, I started drinking at 17, and so I've been thinking, I'm like, do I still have a lot of like those teenager tendencies, like 17-year-old Samantha? And I'm like, absolutely.
yeah. Yeah, and it's like, while our brains can definitely regenerate and we can grow new neurons and learn new things and, be intelligent in that way, I feel like there is something to say about, when we start drinking and then how we respond to life later on. But I feel like the more we're in recovery, the more we do mature in that way, which is really fascinating as well.
Oh, it is. I'm like, I'm not really the same person. So if you knew me last year, you don't really know me anymore.
Oh, yeah. It's definitely a thing. That's why they say don't get into a relationship in the first year because you're growing at such an exponential rate. It's really not fair to someone to try to keep up with you in the rate that you're growing.
I know. Well, I'm married, so I've been married for like 14 years, and I was having these moments where I was like, "What are you doing with your life?" Like, and then I'm like, "Wait, I'm on my own journey. He's on his journey." You know what
Right.
I'm saying? It's like you can't expect people to like be having the same epiphanies of you as you because they're not right or wrong.
Right. Exactly. You just have to adapt with them, but also know that they're not having that exponential growth like you are. So,
I know. I'm like, "Come on, let's go. Let's do this together." And he's like, "But I'm a normal drinker." I'm like, "That's nice."
yeah.
So I was doing a bunch of research for dry January and just looking at
Mm,
the effects of like 30 days without alcohol. And I was reading about how like the neurons in your brain start to regrow, which I thought that was wild. I was like, so you're telling me alcohol literally like kills the neurons in your brain.
it
And I
does.
say about like it's only probably been like 4 to 5 weeks ago. I had this like I was sitting there one day and all of a sudden I was like, I could think really, really clear. And it was
Yeah.
like almost like the light switch went off. I've been referring it to as like, like the hand of God came in my brain and swiped it. Because all of a sudden everything felt clear and I could figure out situations and I was just like moving forward like ultra fast. And, like sometimes people will say like you get a download from the universe. Like that's what it felt like to me. But I had just been reading about like how your neurons grow back and I'm like, maybe that's what's happening. Like maybe my brain is actually working how it was intended to work.
Yeah, and another person who has really good data on this is Dr. Daniel Amen. So at the Amen Clinic, well, I don't know in the clinic, but he shows a lot on his social media how any amount of drinking actually really affects the white and gray matter in the brain. And so it actually does show that it affects the regeneration of the brain for people who drink a lot of alcohol. So stopping drinking, you're right, like, we get new neurons, and then in those first, like, 1 to 3 months of not drinking, you're right, things become super clear, and you're like, "Oh, my brain is working."
Hmm.
It's
And
pretty amazing.
no, it really is, and for the first time in my life, I'm like, "Oh, I have these goals," and like, "Oh, I'm gonna hit them. I'm gonna achieve them," and a lot of them are, like, physical goals, like, I'm like, "Oh, I can run that far," and, "Oh, I can, like, actually, like, change my weight," and all these different things are happening, and honestly, it's the first time in my life where I've been like, "Oh my gosh, like, these things are actually obtainable."
Yes. Yeah, by just stopping drinking for, 1 to 3 months in the beginning.
Yeah, did you experience anything like that?
Oh, yeah. So in the first same thing, in the first 1 to 3 months, all of a sudden my brain started getting really clear, I would say probably in between months 1 and 2, and then I was like, "Oh, I wanna figure out what keeps happening after this." Right? Because it's not just that for people who have drank a lot. It's not just that we stop drinking and then everything's magically wonderful and we know how to deal with life. So there's way more to it.
Oh, that's no, that's like it. That's so it. I'm like, "Oh, now
Yeah.
I have to figure out how to cope."
Mhm. There's that. But initially, yeah, like right before I stopped drinking, I thought I completely destroyed my brain because I was having issues with putting sentences together, and I'm sure it was because of, like, liver toxicity and everything like that, but I couldn't really string together enough words to create sentences, and I couldn't write in my journal anymore, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I have broken my brain." And so then I was like, "I need to fix this. This is a problem at 22 years old if you can't really speak or if you can't write. That's a problem."
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's pretty bad.
Do you like writing and different things like that now?
Yeah. I mean, I can speak much faster than I can write now, but I definitely prefer writing. I'm a trained military journalist, like, writing is my thing, so that and video, um, but yeah, I definitely cherish those skills.
So I know it's
And expression, and your the ability to express yourself is important.
yeah. No, I love that. Okay, so we've kinda touched on this a tiny little bit, but healing your body after alcohol abuse, like, what are some
Yeah.
actual action steps that people can apply?
Yeah, so if they're when they have stopped drinking or if they're moderating or cutting down significantly, so after that, we can making sure that we're hydrated, so drinking enough water, making sure that we're getting enough protein. So this is going to be about 25 to 30 grams of protein per meal. We need that for muscle function, for like body development. There's so many things that we need proteins for in the body, but definitely having protein, definitely changing our environment. So they say, not being around toxic people or toxic things, or if you're watching a lot of toxic things like scrolling online, to limit that because it does affect your biochemistry. So just being mindful of who you're surrounding yourself with and what you're exposing your brain and your mind and your nervous system to.
Okay, you just brought up something really interesting that just triggered in my brain. Do you think that scrolling social media and, like, consuming affects your biochemistry?
I think it does.
That's crazy. What would you
I
define
think it does.
biochemistry as?
Biochemistry is really the signal from the brain causing a biochemical reaction in the body. So, whenever we're changing our thoughts, it changes our biochemistry. So it changes us, like, if we see something that's disturbing, all of a sudden it puts us into fight or flight. And we stay in that situation long enough, it starts affecting our digestion, sex drive, breathing rate, things like that. But if we're looking at things online that are inspirational, that are creative, that are motivational, then that also changes our biochemistry to something where we rest and digest, we're calm, we're in that creative space. So I think it really depends on what we're consuming on social media.
It's hard to control it though, especially if you look at something like TikTok, where I felt like I had a really good algorithm going and then they screwed us here in the US.
Yeah.
They pulled us all offline for a day and it's gone. And now everything is like, very politically charged. What happened to TikTok? And I'm like, I was listening to like God quotes and recovery stories and I'm like Bible stuff and like stories. And I'm like, what has happened?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely changes things, especially for I think if we're looking at things that are like good, bad, like on this like nonstop roller coaster, I feel like that does something to our fight or flight or freeze or fawn where you just like, you know, don't move and you're under a tree kind of a thing and frozen.
Yes.
Like that's not good either. But I think it does something to the nervous system. So I am mindful. I watch a lot of like K beauty stuff and like creative stuff on YouTube, but
I know.
because
I
it's
love
good for
cooking. Yeah.
you know,
Cooking stuff, like
mm,
watching
yeah,
cooking stuff. I love it.
mhm, yeah, definitely helpful for the nervous system.
Yeah. I'm like, I'm never going to make that, but that was really awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so I go to Alcoholics Anonymous, but I know there's a ton of other options for recovery out there. So someone who is struggling with alcohol and they want like a support system, because it is hard to do it at home by yourself. And I know people who, they have a support system and they're totally thriving and doing different things. And I know people who just cut out alcohol and they're also fine and doing great. But then there is like people who struggle. Like they'll ask me, like, well, how do you deal with this? How do you deal with this? And I'm like, well, honestly, like, I depend on my community.
Yeah, so as far as AA, there are meetings online around the world, which is absolutely amazing, and also in person. In addition to that, there's something called IDAA, which is International Doctors of Alcoholics Anonymous. So this is for healthcare providers only. So if you're a healthcare provider and need help with substances or with obviously with alcohol, they talk about both there, but that is definitely a massive, massive support network because in healthcare, you want to be mindful of not going to meetings maybe with your patients and things like that, and vice versa. So there's IDAA, which is all over, obviously international. And then there's something called Celebrate Recovery, which I know is more like church based. And then there's Smart Recovery, which is self-management and recovery training, Rational Recovery, and then there's secular organizations for sobriety. So this is more for people who have an issue with the God word, who want to take all of it's not even religion, it's more of God or universe or nature. You wanna take all of that out of sobriety, and they focus more solely on
Oh, that's
behavior and
interesting.
actions. Yeah,
Yeah. I like that. I what I've always loved about like the community that I belong to is it's like the words are interchangeable. It's
right.
like you don't resonate with this, just pick what you resonate with and go with it. Like
Yeah.
that should never be an excuse for not getting help. It's like there's so many options out there.
I mean, especially, like, when I came into, figuring out, which program to go to and whatnot, I just felt like I was dying, I just needed help. I was, like, 175 pounds light or no, I was 75 pounds lighter than I am now,
Oh
and I
my
was, like,
god.
super, super sick, and I just needed help. So, I was willing to try whatever it took, but also it wasn't, the first place that I went to or the first type of meeting I went to. It was more so you have to find your community and really what, like, resonates with you.
Yeah, and I think as we go along too, like something that resonated with us for a while, it might change a little bit.
Oh, yeah,
And it's like
definitely.
I feel like we need to give ourselves more permission to just be humans and like explore different things.
Yes, and that's where it's really beautiful to have meetings that are in person and also online. Because I know especially there's a lot of women who have children and who are like, "Oh my gosh, I can't make all these meetings per week in person. I have childcare and whatnot." So there are meetings online, so everything will change in whatever area of life that you're in.
I know I had a single mom reach out to me and she's like, "I have kids, like, but I really wanna go." And I was like, "Oh, shoot." But I do think there's meetings online. And she was like, "I
Oh, yeah.
found them." Yeah.
Yeah, so there's support literally everywhere, every single country of the world, pretty much. So,
Yeah. Did you know I found this out because people like to tell me things. If you go on a cruise, they have meetings.
they do.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of awesome.
It is, well, 'cause, being on a cruise is definitely sometimes a drunk fest for a lot of people because they kind of sell you on the alcohol packages and whatnot, so when there's sober people meeting on a ship, it's actually very cool, so I've done those.
Well, the last time I went on a cruise, my one and only cruise, I just wasn't loving it, but I remember, like, day 3, I was like, "So do we just get drunk again? Like, what are we doing?"
Yeah, that's what a lot of people do.
Yeah, it was like, there's nothing else to do.
But there's
Um
a lot of beautiful places to see.
Yeah, I wanna circle back though to talking about protein because I feel like this is a hot topic right now. I cannot
Yeah,
open social media without being like, "Make this high protein meal," and then they, like, dump cottage cheese in it. I think I'm just over it. Like, sometimes I feel like I'm shoving so much protein, like, in my face that I'm like, I have the protein ick. Like, what as a doctor though, because again, like, some actual real advice, like, how much
yeah.
protein should we be eating?
So, I would say definitely 25 to 30 grams of protein per meal.
Yeah, I know you mentioned
Yeah.
that, but do you think it because a lot of times they're like, based on your weight, how much you wanna lose, or do you think it's just, like, straight across the board like that?
I think it's from the type of patients that I see, I would say it's kind of straight across the board because you do need protein to function, for your
Yeah.
brain to function, for your gut, for your muscles, for movement to function, and I wish someone would have told me this. I was bulimic when I was younger, and so I could not figure out my relationship with food. I was dieting since I was, like, 9 years old and was trying to just control my life through food, but I wish somebody told me that I could actually eat protein and carbs and in balance, like, in almost a one-to-one ratio, and actually lose weight and actually be healthy, as opposed to, like, grazing all day, which is also not good because you need your stomach to actually have time to get rid of its contents, and, so actually having, like, 3 meals per day is really healthy, but, yeah, I wish someone would have told me that when I was growing up, that I'm like, "You can actually eat food in a certain ratio and be healthy and function."
So do you logically think I need this validation, okay? Do you think like 75 to 100 grams of protein is enough for a woman?
It depends, like, are they strength training? Are they trying to
Yeah,
lift
so I'm
weights?
I'm lifting weights, I'm doing all these things.
Yeah, so typically the goal with protein should be nearly the amount of weight that you want to lose. So for me right now, it's about like 140 is the goal for protein, 140 grams a day, but also 140 grams of carbs a day because when you are lifting and strength training, you need carbs to burn in order for muscle production. And it's healthy in perimenopause because you just want muscle to put around your joints. I always tell people, I'm like, "You can't just tape yourself together as you age." Like, those joints will start to hurt because the ligaments, everything starts to stiffen, and it hurts. So you need to put healthy muscle, like, on your joints to make them work.
Yeah, I'm like, "Okay, I need to get my protein up." I'm like, "I can do that each meal, the 25 to 30, it's like that extra in between." I'm like, "Where do you
It
get that?" You know?
it's like an extra protein shake.
I know. I'm like, "God, I don't want another damn protein shake." But then I'm like, "I do wanna feel good though."
Yeah. I like a fit foodie Selma, she's on YouTube as well as Instagram, and she has amazing, delicious meals where she focuses on about 100 grams of protein a day.
Okay,
So, instead of eating protein or drinking protein shakes, it's, like, actually ways to get protein in the meals while making them delicious.
I love that.
Yeah, so I follow a lot of her stuff.
Oh, that's cool. I'm gonna check that out. I feel like I wanna, like, get into my YouTube era, like, watching more videos and,
Mhm.
versus, like, the short form, like, blasting in my face.
Yes. Yeah, she has good long form and short form videos.
Okay, so you're located in Scottsdale, is that right?
Yes, Scottsdale,
Eh,
Arizona. Yep.
can you help women, like, all over the world? Like, who do you work with? What do you do?
I predominantly work with high performing women with gut and thyroid issues in Arizona. So that is where my medical license currently is. So that's who I'm able to help right now is women or people in Arizona.
Oh, I love that. Do you do any sort of online consultations at all or just specifically Arizona?
Currently, specifically Arizona, I want to eventually have a global brand where I'm able to help people from all over the world.
Yeah, I love that.
That's my goal.
Okay, so if you guys are not in Arizona, though, go check out your Instagram. What is your handle?
It is Dr. Valerie Gettings, Gettings.
And just for you guys listening, Dr. Valerie has a ton of really good information on there. Like, I went through and watched your reels, and I was like, I learned a lot. You've got some really great content.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so thank you so much for being on today. Thank you for sharing, a little bit of your own story and just some really, really good, like, actionable, like, data.
Mhm.
I do find it really interesting where I know that, like, alcohol is being talked about more where it's causing cancer, but it's kind of like alcohol causes cancer, and I'm like, "Well, I remember when they came out and said that barbecuing your food caused cancer,"
Yes.
So it's kind of interesting to see it linked, especially to breast cancer. That kinda stood out in my mind, so thanks for sharing your knowledge today, and thanks for being on the Samantha Parker Show.
Thanks so much for having me.